Hey folks, Shane DeApril here, co-owner and co-publisher of Campaigns and Elections. This is Campaign Insider. Thanks as always to our Campaign Insider sponsor, Premion, your CTV, OTT political advertising solution. Thrilled to be joined today by Kristin Oblander. She's president of the Oblander Group, and we're here in Atlanta, Georgia. Kristin, thanks for having us at your office.
Thanks for coming to town.
So obviously want to talk about fundraising in 2020. The interesting tension right now, and I think has been for the last couple of election cycles, is your traditional fundraising, larger dollar, more traditional fundraisers versus everybody wanting to fundraise very easily and quickly online,
right,
and how ActBlue has been quite transformative. I'm interested in your take over the last 2 to 3 cycles on how that has developed and how the landscape has changed with fundraising.
Well, fundraising, when I first started the firm, was very analog. When I remodeled the office a few years ago, I had a Rolodex and phone books and things like that. We had to print everything, and I've been at like the forefront of, now we call it digital. We used to call it fundraising emails, but I worked for Howard Dean when he was chair of the DNC and all of that. So we've come a long way with the emails. I don't quite understand some of the Democratic candidates bashing what we call major donor fundraising. We're still subject to limits. The federal campaigns obviously are under the FEC limits, and fundraising is just a wonderful way to get people involved. And demonizing it, I don't see the benefit of that. I don't see any upside to Democrats. We only have so many tools in our toolbox. Why would you eliminate one of the tools in our toolbox?
Yeah, and just to talk about that for a minute, because what I find interesting is now, certainly in this primary season, it all of a sudden has turned to, even somebody giving just a max donation, right? Which is, is not, it's not somebody writing an enormous check. All of a sudden, that person sort of is a fat cat in some people's eyes, right? And that kind of fundraising is frowned upon. Generally speaking, I wonder where you think that is coming from. And in particular, this primary season, you had, it's been an issue in several debates, right? I mean, Pete Buttigieg was hit by, I think, both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders for the wine cave fundraiser, right? Which, I mean, yes, it was in a wine cave owned by a billionaire, right? But it was just a political fundraiser. Where is that kind of feeling coming from, do you think? And does it change at all how you approach doing fundraising events?
I think that Sanders and Warren are just tapping into disaffected voters and riling up that wing of the Democratic Party to fuel their online fundraising, and bashing the major donors is one of the ways to do that. Of course, the limit is $2,800, which to some people is a lot of money. We understand that, but it's not an inordinate amount of money. And quite frankly, like I said, it's a wonderful way to get people involved, and I think it's a lot of classism and bashing people that might, want to participate at a higher level than just the online fundraising. And how many times are people going to get to meet the candidates? Unless you're in Iowa or in New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, once you get through those early primaries, they come in and out of state super quickly. So the fundraisers, no matter what the level, the in-person events is one of the best ways, or one of the only ways in some of the states that donors or voters, donors are voters, would have the opportunity to meet with the candidates.
Has it changed the way you think about venues and where you might host something, for example? Do you sort of look at, when you're planning a fundraiser, think about, is this a location that might be perceived as, out of step with the party's base or something?
We do some vetting of venues. We want to make sure that they're non-discriminatory, that they obviously allow women, and that they don't, do any racial profiling in their membership or things like that. A lot of the events we hold are in private homes, and those people would undergo some vetting. But absolutely not. I mean, a beautiful home or a business, whatever it may be, is a draw. And the way federal election law works, it's called a hospitality exemption, and they can host an event in their home and still contribute. It's $1,000 per husband or wife. That doesn't count against the limit. So that's why a lot of the events are in private homes.
Yeah. A question for you on fundraising a little further down the ballot. One thing that I've heard from fundraisers really over the past few cycles is that with the advent of small dollar online donations, everybody running for county commissioner to state legislature comes into their office and thinks that they can find a way to raise a lot of small dollar dollars online. Yeah. How do you deal with that on the one hand, and two, how much is that actually the case for some candidates?
I do a lot of fundraising trainings for candidates, legislative candidates, women candidates running for county or municipal office, and my fundraising training does not include any digital or email segment of the training at all. They always just think I omitted it or forgot, and no, I didn't forget, because when you're running for those kind of offices, probably 90% of the money you raise is going to be during call time and over the phone, and call time geared towards events. But people see the presidential campaigns, clicking a button, and the money comes pouring in, and they think that that'll be applicable to their race, and it's just not, because they don't have name ID. And people don't get excited about the down ballot races. It's really more about doing some highly refined targeting on their lists of previous donors and things like that that might be interested in the lower ballot race. But I mean, we still do email, but there's, it's not the same.
Has it gotten harder to, I know call time is always difficult for fundraisers and candidates, has it gotten harder as the environment has become seemingly easier to just raise money online, and candidates think, why do I have to sit on this phone for 8 hours?
How do you describe harder when it's always been so hard? No, it's the same level of difficulty. We still have to raise a major donor dollars no matter what the race, honestly. And unless you're Sanders or Warren and have the luxury of not doing fundraisers, which is not applicable to most races. But that's never going to change, because the candidates and the elected officials reaching out to their supporters is a great way to connect.
Last question for you, Kristin. As you look forward the next cycle or two, do you see anything coming down the pike, particularly on the fundraising side of things, that either makes your job easier, makes it easier for candidates to connect with donors and raise those dollars? What do you see changing, if anything?
A lot more of the independent committees and super PACs, or in Florida the political committees with no limits and things like that really take a lot of the power away from the hard money campaign committees that are subject to the limit, and the races are more and more being run by the outside groups, some of which can coordinate, some of them cannot. And then we're going to continue to see that trend, because contrary to public belief, the campaigns are subject to pretty low limits depending on the race, but they're all subject to limits, and the outside groups are really going to continue to trend to be a bigger player in the races.
Kristin Oblander, president of the Oblander Group, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for watching Campaign Insider.